Let's talk a little bit about iterative elaboration and refinement. Now, user stories are written, and everybody here, at least I would have to assume everybody here has gone to school at least once, and they've had to write a composition at least once. And we were taught how to write compositions, and it's actually a pretty smart way of doing it. And we basically do it the same way that we write user stories. We want to sit down and write, say I was going to write my autobiography. Well, I need to write down, I'm going to start off and say, well, what are the major interesting things in my life, and make a list, and that's going to be my outline. I may even start off with something really simple and just say Mitch's life. And then I elaborate that with an outline. Mitch the early years, Mitch the forgotten years, AKA the college years, Mitch the Wall Street years, all those things would then be my first level outline. And then I'm going to successfully add more material to the outline until I've conveyed the information that I need. When I write user stories, we're going to do it the same way. User stories start out in kind of a larval stage. They start out, maybe it's a simple verb noun or noun verb, or maybe it's just the name, the very, very basic name of a functionality. And then we start to elaborate that into a real story by adding more information into the narrative, by adding material that turns into acceptance criteria, also by iteratively updating estimates, risks, and dependencies. And risks and dependencies are oft forgotten parts of user stories that we need to assess. And then we repeat this process until the definition of ready is achieved. And that's a whole other talk unto itself as well, but just in case you're not familiarity with it, we say the definition of ready is part of a team agreement between the product owner and the team, or among the team, we could say, as to what constitutes when a story is ready to be engaged by the team. And the simplest version of that is the invest mnemonic that we looked at a few moments ago. And that the story has the minimal requirements to be engaged by the team. It needs to be, for example, at 75 to 85% completeness. It needs to be estimated. It needs to be risk evaluated. Dependencies need to be evaluated. All these things are baked into a definition of ready. Definition of ready is a living agreement between the members of the team with each other, and the product owner being in a Scrum team, just one of the members of the team. And the definition of ready is agreed upon by the team. It should not really be imposed. Agile teams are supposed to be self-managing, self-organizing, autonomous. So we don't want to impose a definition of ready on a team. We want them to agree to when they feel a user story meets the criteria to be engaged as a work in progress. So just a little bit more on iterative elaboration. Once again, we start off with very general ideas, and then we iterate to increase the specificity. We don't lock ourselves up someplace and say, okay, we're just going to work on this story and we're not leaving until we're done. The best way to do that is to start off with small stories. I call that in that larval state. They may be incomplete, have an incomplete narrative and incomplete acceptance criteria. And then we elaborate iteratively. And the stories, every time we iterate over a story, it becomes more real, it becomes more tangible, it becomes more doable, it becomes more estimable. And the understanding of risks and dependencies, which are just as important as the other parts of the story, becomes clear. And we have to remember, user stories don't start as ready. They start as a very tiny particle of an idea, and it takes iterative elaboration to get to the point where they're ready to be engaged by the team. And we use the 3 C's technique. This is also in a number of different methodologies. The 3 C's are card, conversation, and confirmation. And I find it especially amusing given our current situation of pandemic, where back in the good old days when we would all get together and huddle somewhere in a conference room with a few stacks of sticky notes. I still have mine with me, always handy. Sharpie, always handy. And we would do this on a board, and we would put these cards up, and we would put whatever information we knew on the card and document it, and that becomes our larval, our nascent story. And then we engage in conversation to try and elaborate the details, most of the details of how we know the value has been delivered. So in this case, if I want to give the ability for users to unlock their accounts, I need to know and have a conversation about how the users will make that request. And a product owner or an architect will tell me, look, there's going to be a special email account they'll use so that they can reset their passwords. And then that confirmation gets baked into the story as an acceptance criterion, in this case using Gherkin format. And this is a really a never-ending cycle. The elaboration over the backlog is meant to be continuous. It's not something that you do once a week for an hour. It's something that you have to bake into your time of work as a product owner, a product manager, a member of a product management team to get stories ready to be engaged. This process has to happen, and you can't do it all at once. And you can do it in the safe context of PI planning, which is when you are generally expected to get your stories ready for planning. Of course, as teams, if you know what features you're going to be getting, you can also, as teams, allocate time to get yourself ready and have these larval stories ready to go so that by the time you're PI planning, you're a step ahead. However, that's only the case if you know what features you're getting before you engage them. Otherwise, you have to wait and see. So we start the 3 C's iteratively. We start out with a simple idea, like it might be reset password. Okay, that's just a noun and a verb, nothing special. But I need to elaborate. Well, what does that mean, reset password? So I read that out loud to the team. There's an impression that some people have, I think it's a misunderstanding, that entire teams must partake in all story elaboration always. That's not how I coach. I coach that it's the product owner's responsibility, or amongst their responsibilities, to find out who the right people are to talk about each story. And that we don't need to have agreement asset from the whole team in order to move a story forward. That turns into a very wasteful practice, and it can be taken to ridiculous extremes. But when we say the team, we mean the little t team, whoever's working on the story. We add a little bit of information each time. There's nothing worse than convening 15 people on a meeting and having everybody watch one person type something into Jira. That is not iterative collaboration. I don't know what it is, but that's not it. That's something, iterative elaboration is a ongoing conversation between all the members of the team that are going to be involved with delivering that value. We set time boxes and we allocate time, place, and space to define and refine. You must make time with your teams to do this and take as much advantage of the spike, which is allocating time to do this research about stories as you can. And my kind of byline in this is iteration is better than rumination. In other words, you're better off if you can't agree about something, walk away from it, talk about something else for a while, come back to it. It's better to do that than get stuck on trying to elaborate a complex or particularly stubborn story. Let it go, come back to it the next time. So that is pretty much the conclusion of our little chat. I have there is a concluding part. It's really my favorite, well, I won't say my favorite part. I think it's the most interesting part. So here it is. But since I often talk about storytelling as a metaphor for product management, I've included this because remember how we said that we say once upon a time when we start off a fairy tale. And then when we finish it off, we say, and they lived happily ever after. But it's kind of interesting that not everybody says happily ever after. If we were to go to South Africa and we spoke Afrikaans, we would say flout, flout, The story is out. I just love the way it basically flout means it's it would be the sound of a flute. So it'd be basically toot toot. The story is done. In Bengali, we would say Amar kothati puroro notegachti norolo, and that means the story is over and the goat has eaten the spinach. If we were from Bulgaria, we would say itri dniyali pili vesilili, which means, and for 3 days they ate, drank, and had a good time. So definitely that's a pitch for visiting Bulgaria. And in Swedish, where I have many friends and I know a little bit of Swedish, at the end of a fairy tale we say, snip, snap, snoot, sovargen saga slut, which means snip, snap, snoot, the story is over. And with that, my presentation is over. Thank you all very much. Here's my contact information. I'm pretty publicly out there. LinkedIn is where I usually hang out. You're welcome to engage me in any way you want. Throw me a contact on LinkedIn. I gladly accept all and any contacts on LinkedIn. This is my personal email because you never know. And I encourage any of you that want to talk. We have plenty of time to answer and talk about and answer some questions. So I will give it back to you, Kit.
I have a question.